Chair recognizes Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start off by just thanking our law enforcement witnesses for your service. I know there's 2020 is hindsight. It's pretty easy to Monday morning quarterback, and I want to make sure that we guard against doing so. Certainly what I've seen from testimony, it seems like there's a fair amount of thought, a fair amount of due diligence that went into this. So, again, I appreciate your service. I also want to say I find the videos, as you said, Chief Sund, sickening, the violence reprehensible, the racial slurs repugnant, and I want to make sure the perpetrators, the people that engaged in the violence, are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I've got a long list of questions, which this format really doesn't lend itself to asking, so what I will be doing is preparing a letter for the committee chair and hoping that they will ask those questions and investigate these issues that I'll be listing. But what I want to do is, in terms of asking some questions, I want to start out by reading excerpts from what I thought was a very interesting eyewitness account by J. Michael Waller. He is a senior analyst for a strategy at the Center of Security Policy. His areas of concentration include political and psychological warfare and subversion. He's a former professor and instructor at the Institute of World Politics at the Naval Postgraduate School. He's a current lecturer at the John F. Kennedy School of Special Warfare Center at Fort Bragg. He wrote this piece titled, "I Saw Provocateurs at the Capitol Riot on January 6th. And he basically arrived on scene about 11:30 from Union Station, and I'll just start reading. At about 11:30, I walked from near Union Station and noticed a small number of Capitol Police dressed in full riot gear with shin guards and shoulder guards. Then I walked up Pennsylvania Avenue toward an empty Freedom Park. He noticed that the speech had broken up, and so a crowd was walking down Constitution Avenue. He joined them at 13th Street. But he said the mood of the crowd was positive and festive. Of the thousands of people I passed or who passed me along Constitution Avenue, some were indignant and contemptuous of Congress, but not one appeared angry or incited to riot. Many of the marchers were families with small children. Many were elderly, overweight, or just plain tired or frail, traits not typically attributed to the riot-prone. Many wore pro-police shirts or carried pro-police black and blue flags. Although the crowd represented a broad cross-section of Americans, mostly working class by their appearance and manner of speech, some people stood out. They didn't share the jovial, friendly, earnest demeanor of the great majority. Some obviously didn't fit in, and he describes four different types of people: plainclothes militants, agents provocateurs, fake Trump protesters, and then disciplined, uniformed column of attackers. I think these are the people that probably planned this. He goes on, the D.C. Metropolitan Police were their usual professionally detached selves, standing on curbs or at street crossings and exchanging an occasional greeting from marchers. When we crossed 1st Street Northwest to enter the Capitol grounds where the Capitol Police had jurisdiction, I noticed no police at all. Several marchers expressed surprise. The openness seemed like a courtesy gesture from Congress, which controls security. That appearance of low threat level made no sense. Yet no Capitol Police appeared anywhere from what we could see. Now, again, I'm taking these excerpts in order, but there's a lot more to this piece. What looked like tens or even hundreds of thousands of people surged down the avenues as far as one can see, but almost everyone seemed talkative and happy. No police could be seen on the platform for now. No police could be seen anywhere. People kept surging in from Constitutional Avenue, and the plaza quickly filled up and overflowed onto the lawn. Everyone squeezed closer and closer together, with most in high spirits. Some trouble began up in the front, near the base of the inaugural platform itself, but we could not see what was happening. Then something happened at the front of the crowd. It seemed like a scuffle, but from 40 feet back I couldn't see. People started chanting USA, USA, and other slogans. For a few seconds I saw what looked like police in a tussle with some of the marchers up front, what appeared to be an organized group in civilian clothes. This organized group are the cell I would call the plainclothes militants. They fit right in with MAGA people. Suddenly, energy surged from the front of the crowd as the anti-riot police, above on the inaugural platform, visibly tensed up. One fired a tear gas canister, not at the plainclothes militants at the front line, but into the crowd itself. Then another. Flash grenades went off in the middle of the crowd. The tear gas changed the crowd's demeanor. There was an air of disbelief as people realized that the police whom they supported were firing on them. "What are you doing? We support you," someone yelled. All of a sudden, pro-police people felt the police were attacking them, and they didn't know why. More tear gas. A canister struck a girl in the face, drawing blood. The pro-police crowd went from disbelief and confusion to anger. I'll stop there. The last 5 pages is titled, Provocateurs Turn Unsuspecting Marchers into an Invading Mob. So I'd really recommend everybody in the committee read this account, and I ask that it be entered into the record. But Chief Sund, I want to ask you, is one of the House managers made a big deal that this was predictable, this was foreseeable, which I don't believe. Do you believe that what happened, the breach of the Capitol, did you believe that's foreseeable and predictable?
No, I don't, nor do, if you look at some of our other partner agencies, I think Acting Chief Conte actually made the statement that a breach of the Capitol was not something anybody anticipated, nor do I think some of our federal partners expected it. I don't think Secret Service would have brought up the Vice President if they expected it.
Is part of that because of what you'd experienced in the past, what this Mr. Waller experiences? The vast majority of Trump supporters are pro-law enforcement, and the last thing they would do is violate the law?
I will say that information I've received from some of my officers where they were trying to prevent people from coming into the building, and people were showing up saying, hey, we're police, let us through, and still wanting to violate the law to get inside the building. So,
Again, I've got a long, long list. I just want to close with the 2 former Sergeant of Arms. I knew these committees were going to start an investigation. I waited a couple weeks. I didn't see any letter go out, oversight letter, so I wrote my own on the 21st. And I just have a question for both the former Sergeant of Arms. Did you get my letter, my oversight letter with my questions?
I did not receive your letter. I left town right after I resigned, but I certainly look forward to working with you and your staff to answer your questions.
Okay, well, if you could give us an address, because we sent it to the Acting Sergeant of Arms. That Acting Sergeant of Arms won't even let us know whether they passed that letter along to you. Apparently they didn't. Mr. Stenger, did you receive my letter?
I don't recall it, Senator, but it might have come, but I don't recall.
Chief Sund, one last question for you. Do you regret resigning?
Yes, I do, sir. I certainly do regret resigning. I love this agency. I love the women and men of this agency, and I regret the day I left.
Well, Mr. Irving, Mr. Stenger, I really wish you'd respond. First of all, look for my letter, and I'd like an answer to that as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into my line of questioning for today's subject, Ms. Smyslova, I received, when I'm sitting here in the hearing, a press release from Capitol Police that said that we have obtained intelligence that shows a possible plot to breach the Capitol by an identified militia group on Thursday, March 4th. Is that a threat that you're aware of?
Senator, we issued a bulletin last night, co-authored with the FBI, about extremists discussing March 4th and March 6th. Is that what you're referring to? It's a joint intelligence bulletin we released last night around, it was very late, midnight, I think. Yes. Okay.
Well, again, so the threats are ongoing.
Yes.
General Walker, to review the timeline, at 1:49, Chief Sund contacted you. At 2:15, the Capitol was breached. I think in your testimony you said you had available 340 D.C. National Guard troops. Is that correct?
Well, sir, it was actually half of that. So half were on the streets helping the Metropolitan Police Department. The other half would have came in to relieve them. But we would have called them in to come in.
Okay. So you had 40 in the quick reaction force, correct?
Yes, sir.
So had you been able to, had this all been pre-approved by the Secretary of Defense? And I'm mindful of the considerations of having military involved in civil disturbances, and I think that's part of the issue. Some of the blowback that occurred with the spring instances. How quickly could have you gotten how many people to the Capitol?
20 minutes.
How many people?
150.
Okay. I think that's important information to have. I think, quite honestly, what we need to do here is we need to completely reconstruct what happened. And I mean completely reconstructed. We need to obtain eyewitness testimony from different vantage points, from different perspectives, and that's certainly what I've tried to do. Ms. Sanborn, how many points of confrontation occurred during the riot? I mean, in other words, were these primarily at choke points, doors, windows that were breached, and then inside the Capitol, again, outside the House chamber? Or was there the Capitol is 751 feet long. Was this a 751 long line that Capitol Police and other law enforcement were battling protesters?
Thank you for the question. I think we're still in the process of gathering that data. Obviously, the folks that we have charged, we've charged for breaching and getting inside, and so we at least know that at some point they got through a choke point. The actual distance of how long that was is still part of what we're examining, sir.
Okay, but we've got all kinds of video, all kinds of photographs, so you obviously are examining that, and from that video, you've been able to arrest 300 people. 300 people have been charged. 18 have been charged with conspiracy. 40 have been arrested for assault on law enforcement officers. So have you, looking at those videos, maybe not been able to identify the people, but have you counted the number of people that you want to identify, for example, that will probably be charged with assault?
So we're still doing that, and that number increases just like the arrests every day. And so far, we have identified hundreds of people that we're trying to still identify.
Okay, well, again, we've got 300 individuals who have been charged, 40 have been charged by assault. Do you expect the hundreds of people to be charged with assault, or will those be disorderly conduct, unlawful entry? I mean, give me some sort of sense of the extent of this.
Absolutely, it's a fair question. So I think the charges have ranged from everything from trespassing to obstruction to definitely assault on federal officers. We have a fair number of those, and so the charges based on the actual behavior that the individual partook that day definitely vary.
How many firearms were confiscated in the Capitol or on Capitol grounds during that day?
To my knowledge, we have not recovered any on that day from any other arrests at the scene at this point. But I don't want to speak on behalf of Metro and Capitol Police,
Okay.
but to my knowledge, none.
So nobody's been charged with an actual firearm weapon in the Capitol or on Capitol grounds?
Correct. The closest we came was the vehicle that had the Molotov cocktails in it, and when we did a search of that vehicle later on, there was a weapon. But
How many shots were fired that we know of?
I believe the only shots that were fired were the ones that resulted in the death of the one lady.
Okay. Well, again, I appreciate the chair's comments about a bipartisan, nonpartisan investigation here, seeking out the truth. That's what I'm trying to do. Cognizant of how I was reacted to by offering an eyewitness account at the last hearing, I'll risk entering another piece of reporting into the record. This is from the New York Times. Hopefully that'll be viewed more favorably. The title is A Small Group of Militants, Outsized Role in the Capitol Attack. In that report, it says federal prosecutors have said members of the Oath Keepers militia group planned and organized their attack and, quote, put into motion the violence that overwhelmed the Capitol. The reason I'm entering this in the record and read that quote is that it really does seem to align with the eyewitness account that I read portions of in the record last week. No conspiracy theory, just an eyewitness account from a knowledgeable observer. I didn't get to the point of the actual attack, and I want to just read a couple excerpts. This is the title, Provocateurs Turn Unsuspecting Marches into an Invading Mob. And again, these provocateurs are primarily white supremacist groups. Then a loud bellowing shout from behind, quote, forward, do not retreat, forward. Then two other men standing across from one another on the high granite curbs on either side of the footpath bellowed variations of forward, do not dare retreat. Some made direct eye contact with people and pointed directly at them as if trying to psych them into submitting. A third man standing on a chair also shouting forward, reached down and grabbed me by the shoulder and barked, don't retreat, get back up there. It wasn't an expression of enthusiasm or solidarity. It sounded like a military order. And it wasn't from a wild-eyed kid. This guy was probably in his 50s. He looked furious with me. Nobody seemed aware the Capitol was physically under attack. The tear gas caused pandemonium. But there was still no stampede, and people helped create or widen paths to allow others to leave the area. Then from the north, a column of uniformed, agile younger men walked briskly, single file toward the inaugural stand. They came from They came within 2 feet of me. Their camouflage uniforms were clean, neat, and with a pattern I couldn't identify. These were the disciplined, uniformed column of attackers I had seen. There were a good 3 dozen of them moving in a single snake-like formation. They were organized, they were disciplined, they were prepared. We're taking the Capitol, the first or second announced. You're going to get arrested, someone called. Ms. Sandborn, is that does that tie into with what you're uncovering as you investigate exactly what happened in the Capitol that day, that you had these armed militia groups that had conspired and organized to be there, maybe dozens, we don't know how many, but that they were organized and knew how to use the mob to storm the Capitol? Is that kind of what you're seeing?
We definitely so far are seeing a mixture of that, absolutely. We're seeing people that got caught up in the moment, got caught up in the sort of the energy, et cetera, and made their way into the Capitol, and those are probably the ones that you're seeing the charges simply of trespassing. And then we're definitely seeing that portion that you're pointing out, which is small groups and cells now being charged with conspiracy that coalesced either on site or even days or weeks prior and had sort of an intent that day, and they too probably caught people up in the energy.
So just one final comment. I would urge anybody that criticized me for entering an eyewitness account in the record last week to please read the eyewitness account to take a look at actually what the truth is. Thank you.